Men, as per the Coolidge effect, are genetically wired for a variety in terms of physical intimacy. Yeah. Are women genetically wired to be gold diggers? Yes. Well, okay. Women are genetically wired to be opportunists. Put it that way. I'm not going to use the term gold diggers because that's like it's overplayed. If you would like me to tell you what my definition of a gold digger is, I'd be happy to. But in fact, I will here in just a second. But women are most definitely opportunistic. Again, if you have, dude, I'm sure MCD. I'm sure you have read The Rational Male. I'm sure you're aware of was it Iron Rule of Tomasi number 6, right? Which is women fundamentally lack the capacity to love a man in the way that a man expects that she should be able to love him. Again, it goes back to the idea that it like men love idealistically, women love opportunistically. I'm the one who said that back in really 2007, but it's been in the book since 2013. Anytime you hear somebody using those terms or like coming up with that concept or thinking that they're on something really super profound, just know that that's Iron Rule of Tomasi number 6 in the book and has been around for going on 20 plus years. Okay. Men love idealistically. And we need to focus on that first because men believe that love matters for the sake of love. They want to say, well, if the right girl will love me no matter what. And I don't mean unconditionally. Like most men realize that they got to be on top of their game. That's why just be yourself has never really sat well with most guys, unless they're like really pathetic betas. Okay. So men tend to love idealistically. We want to believe that love matters for the sake of love. She's going to love me, right? Well, and sometimes we'll think that, especially guys who are more sort of fixated on transaction, and that's what we're going to talk about today is transactional love versus validational love, or transactional sex versus validational sex. But if your only frame of reference for sexuality or your only frame of reference for intimacy and love is exchange, then a gold digger is just a more open and obvious woman who is opportunistic. All women are opportunists. Women love opportunistically. Women will not allow themselves to make an emotional investment in a man unless certain criteria are made. We were just talking about this. Like in some cases, that criteria might be the guy has to make 68% more money than she does. Is that true of all women? No, but it's in the realm. It's in the same ballpark. Well, Rolo thinks that I earn 68, 70% rounded off, 70% more than I do. That's so false. My man doesn't earn that. I'm like, yeah, which is why you're probably not going to be with that man for very much longer or whatever. Or there has to be some value added asset or characteristic or attribute that guy has that offsets that. So, for example, and I will die on this fucking hill, okay? Because I've been this guy. For hell, I'm the drummer in my band, Jake Cope, looking at you is this guy right now. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It really doesn't. There are women that love Jake, and Jake is just like, living on a prayer, man. I like the song, man. He living on a prayer, like go paycheck to paycheck. I'm trying to help him out. I'm trying to put him into the right places. I'm trying to get him paid. I want to, at some point, once Reignite really sort of takes off, I will probably make Jake my PA. But that time is not now. He's a very talented drummer. I need to keep him around. I'm happy to help him out just because I know I need Jake, and I like him. He's a good dude, but he's not paid. But the dude gets pussy like you would not believe. And I know who he's been with. Let's just put it that way. And does not need a lot of money. In fact, I have been Jake, by the way. That's why maybe that's one of the reasons I like Jake so much. In my 20s, I had I lived in a 1-bedroom studio apartment with a mini fridge. My dining room table was a spool, as I said before, like one of those wood, like what they like road construction, like wraps the like cables around this big wooden spools. And so that was like my dining room table. And then, a box spring and a mattress, no bed, no frame, just a box spring and a mattress. And I will tell you right now, at the poorest I've ever been, I had a 1979 Toyota pickup with no tailgate, which, by the way, was the car that I met my wife in, the woman who would be my wife. And I had a Randall half stack, and I had 2 guitars, and I had my pedal effects. Those are my liquid assets in my mid to late 20s, well, early to mid late 20s. And I will tell you right now, when I was at my poorest was when I had my most sexual opportunity. And because women didn't care. They didn't care if they knew that was part of the deal. So there had to be something that would offset the fact that, well, okay, he doesn't have a lot of money, but he's got a 10-inch dick, right? But he looks good. He's a rock star. He's in a band. He's a struggling musician. He's a struggling artist. He's whatever, right? So there's kind of like, as I said, women will gaslight them. So they're really good at gaslighting themselves. And what do they gaslight themselves about the most? Value added propositions. Well, I know he doesn't make as much money as I do, and he's working at Guitar Center or Doctor Music or wherever. He's trying, though. He's gonna be something. He's got potential, and when he becomes a rock star, I want to be right there with him. Or I have known women who they're attractive, don't get me wrong, but they make a good chunk of change in a particular profession, and I'm not going to mention which one it is, but I've known women in a particular profession, let's just say a medical profession, and make a good chunk of change, and they're good looking, but they're not like FHM models, and there's not the chicks that you would see necessarily at like Babes in Toyland or something like that. They're still attractive, very, very attractive, but not as attractive as like sort of like, the bikini model attractive, but they have really hot, like snowboarder, surfer boyfriends who don't make a lot of money, smoke a lot of weed, and don't really have much ambition in their lives, but they live with their girlfriend because the girlfriend pays the rent, the girlfriend pays the food, the girlfriend pays for weed, the girlfriend pays for whatever. Like maybe he's a starving artist or a starving musician or something like that. Hell, that's how Motley Crue got started. Vince Neil had a girlfriend who had a lot of money, who just basically liked fucking him, not because like he had nothing to his name, and made a shit ton of money, later on, of course, in Motley Crue. But there was a lot. I knew tons of people back in the late 80s, early 90s in the Hollywood metal scene, like tons of guys who were doing exactly the same thing I was doing, except I was actually probably a little more paid than they were because I could afford at least a rent on a one bedroom studio apartment. But it had nothing to do with money. It had nothing to, and it had like, you don't have to have money to have status. You can have a really good talent. You can be on top. You can be on a stage. You can be in some way locally famous. There's lots of ways to achieve status and prestige that have nothing to do with money, and that you'll get laid. You will get laid as a result of that. But going anywhere beyond that might be a little bit more difficult. Like if you want to have some sort of super long-term relationship. But most of those guys that these women who would get attached to, they knew they were losers, but they were fun, exciting losers that like dickmatized them and fucked the living bejesus out of them. And they loved that because there's no way that on any normal circumstances, if they're finding a guy who had a lot of money and looked as good, though, those guys didn't want to have anything to do with those girls. And you'll still see the same thing today. So as far as gold diggers are concerned, no, not all women are gold diggers, but all women are opportunists when it comes to intimacy, when it comes to sex, when it comes to love. Okay. But remember that opportunism isn't necessarily defined by economics, by finances. That opportunism could be like, I will never have another, like it could be sexual opportunism. Like I keep saying, like hypergamy cannot afford to miss out on a prime opportunity to get fucked or fuck an alpha guy. That's the whole premise behind the hot guy in the foam cannon party on spring break in Cancun. He was hot, you were drunk, and one thing led to another. That's the premise behind all of that. That guy doesn't have to be in finance, 6'5", blue eyes, trust fund, whatever the fuck it is, right? He doesn't have to have that. He just has to be in the right place at the right time, look good, and be a good sexual opportunity. You want to know how one night stands happen? That's how they happen. Oh, I wouldn't want to have meaningless sex. There's no such thing as meaningless sex. Nothing whatsoever. Do you know who came up with meaningless sex? Women who regretted having sex with a guy, because women regret sex more. Men regret the sex that they don't have. Women regret the sex that they do have. But it's actually, meaningless sex is made up by moralistic guys who don't fuck, because they think that any sex that they're having has got to be more meaningful because they're not getting it as much. And so there must be it must be quantity and quality. Right. So if you're having quantity, a lot of sex, it's got to be meaningless sex. Why? Why does it have to be meaningless sex? Just because you get laid a lot, that necessarily means that you're having meaningless sex. No, it doesn't. Every single one, like if you have like a guy who's got a 100 lay count, and you've got a guy who's got like a 5 lay count. The guy who's got the 5 lay count thinks that he's having better, more meaningful, more impactful, more cosmically significant sex on some sort of universal cosmic scale, right? Well, of course it does. But it means more to him because he doesn't get fucking laid as much as the guy who has 100 girls that he in his notch count. So of course it's going to be more meaningful to him. It has to be. It has to be more meaningful to him. But that doesn't mean that the guy who has like sex with 100 girls, that he didn't have some sort of, some sort of connection with more than half of them. I don't know. But the thing is the guys will come up with those. They have to come up with that because meaningless sex is cope. That's what it is. Like, I wouldn't want to be like those guys. They have meaningless sex. It's only meaningful to you because you get it so fucking rarely. It's going to be more meaningful. Of course it will be. If you were a guy that had, if you had 2 guys that are both getting they're both getting 100, they both have 100 lay count. The guy who's saying, "Oh, I wouldn't want to be like this guy because he's got 100, same notch count as I do. He's having meaningless sex." Like, no, you don't hear those arguments between guys like that because they don't care. It's like there's just as meaningful as the next guy. So, like the idea of meaningless sex is it's cope and it's bullshit. And I'll tell you, want to know why it's bullshit? Because women love opportunistically and guys love idealistically. That's why it is more meaningful to those guys, because most men don't have the same sexual opportunities that the average woman does. Like especially in an age of the global sexual marketplace right now, women have way more sexual opportunity than men do. That's why they make so much money off of advertising their sexuality and their availability. So yeah, of course, of course, it's going to seem more meaningful to the guy who's not getting laid. The guy who doesn't fuck. Sex is like this. It's fucking manna from heaven. Are you kidding? I'm sure. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the guy who's having has got a 30 notch count is having all 30 of them were meaningless. I meant to fuck every girl I ever fucked.